everyone, Cash Creatures here, and today I'm going to be going over the graded Pokemon cards that I think are going to take off over the next 6 to 12 months. So let's get right into it. First, let's take a look at which slabs have been going crazy in the last 6 to 12 months, and see if we can find any patterns. On the modern side, the Bubble Mew from Paladin Fates has been going absolutely crazy. Just 2 months ago, around May, the PSA 10 bottomed out at about $760 in market price. Now we see recent sales up to $1,200, and there was a few even higher than that. I think it's not going to be too long before it solidifies itself as a $1,200 PSA 10 slab. And who knows, it could even continue to push up higher shortly after. Otherwise, the market for PSA 10s from Scarlet and Violet era has been alright, but it seems that what investors are flocking to now is actually the rarer cards and the ones with much shorter supply. That brings us to older cards, such as the ones from X and Y era and Sun and Moon era, such as this Gyarados EX. This card has been going absolutely crazy. Since December 2024, it's gone from being about $450 to about $1,500 now, with some sales even higher than that. The Gyarados has a PSA 10 gem rate of about 21%, which is abysmal. This thing only has 1,100 copies in PSA 10. There's also the Mewtwo EX from Breakthrough. This has a similar pattern. Around December of last year, it was about $440, and now it's selling for about $1,500 to looks like $2,000 in a PSA 10. So absolutely crazy on that one. And if we look at the numbers graded on this one, we can see why. This thing has a gem rate of about 11%, with only 237 PSA 10s out there. So this is an extremely rare card, and it kind of makes sense as to why it's fetching these such high prices. Some of the other cards taking off are some tag teams, such as this Gengar and Mimikyu GX from Team Up. Now obviously Team Up is a very expensive set itself, and the cards from it are going absolutely crazy. In a PSA 10, this Gengar was about $1,000, $1,100 back in December, and now it's selling for about $3,000 to honestly up to like $5,000. So insane price increase on this one. And if we take a look at the population, it has a gem rate of about 50%, so not too hard, but there are only 1,500 copies out there. So pretty rare card again. Next we have the Latios and Latios GX from Team Up. This is actually the top hit in Team Up, and the raw price alone is about $2,000. PSA 10 back in December was about $3,500, and now it's selling for all the way up to $10,000, it looks like. Anywhere from like $7,000 to $10,000. This one has a 44% PSA 10 gem rate, and about a little under 2,000 copies out there in a PSA 10. So again, these short supply cards from Sun and Moon era and X and Y era, these top chase hits, they're going absolutely crazy in a PSA 10. Now if we go back to the Mew EX from Paladin Fates, this one is obviously a very iconic card as well, but it does have 11,000 plus PSA 10 copies out there, and it's still a modern set, less than 2 years old, and there's probably more going to be graded and more going to get that PSA 10 status, so definitely not as rare of a card. Now yes, it is possible to buy some of these cards at even these prices and still make a huge return in the future. But for most people, it's unrealistic to get these Sun and Moon era cards in a PSA 10 at this point. And a lot of Scarlet and Violet era is still a bit too new, so there's a higher chance of volatility, especially for these chase cards with over 10,000 copies in a PSA 10. You'll have a lot of sellers who either pulled these or bought them raw and graded them, or just bought the PSA 10 and saw huge returns. And you just kind of end up with more hands that are ready to offload and undercut each other in the event of a market downturn. So where does that leave us? Well, vintage is cooked and honestly just kind of stagnant and a bit boring for most new collectors. X and Y and Sun and Moon are getting way too expensive and pricing out a lot of collectors. So where is the money going to next? In my opinion, it's Sword and Shield and early Scarlet and Violet. One of the categories that I think are going to do really well are trainer gallery cards. Now, a lot of these artworks are absolute bangers, and with the return of trainer Pokemon cards in Journey Together and Destined Rivals, I can see some of the older ones really taking off, and potentially even starting some sort of hype cycle for these types of cards. And I do think the most iconic one is the Starmie V. This artwork is just amazing. It's a well-known Gen 1 Pokemon, and it's a trainer that everyone who's ever seen the Pokemon anime knows, Misty. And the market clearly agrees with me as well, as it's already the most expensive trainer gallery card. But if we take a look at the PSA 10 prices, it actually held up really well in the downturn that we recently had around March, April, May, and it's already heading back up over $300. I think this could easily be a $400 to $500 card by the end of the year. There's about 7,000 PSA 10 copies out there right now, which is a lot, but it's a modern card, so it's nothing too crazy. Next, we have some early Scarlet and Violet era cards that are extremely hard to get in a PSA 10. This Miraidon EX from Scarlet and Violet base is holding up really well around $100. And honestly, if you can find this under $100, I would say grab it as soon as you can. If we take a look on eBay, it doesn't even look like there are any buy it now listings under $100 anymore. Actually, it doesn't even look like there's any under $150. The cheapest one seems to be about $154 plus tax. There's a BGS 9.5 here, that's about $120. So if you can snag this for about $100, maybe even $120 at a local deal, I would say go for it. This card has about a 45% PSA 10 gem rate, so nothing too crazy, but it is less than 50%, so it is kind of hard to grade. It has only 3,000 copies out there right now in a PSA 10. So now we're starting to see some of those numbers closer to Sun and Moon era and X and Y era. The chase cards of those eras had about, 1,000 to about 3,000 copies in a PSA 10 per chase card. Next we have the Tyranitar from Paldea Evolved. Now this is another great art. Really love the color work on this, and you can see a bunch of Pokemon in the background, Staraptors, and yeah, just a really cool card. Kind of gives it that Godzilla feel. And this card is absolutely abysmal to grade. It has under a 20% PSA 10 gem rate and a little over 1,200 copies out there right now in a PSA 10. So this is again one of those really rare cards in a PSA 10. If we take a look at the price, it did hit about $400 back in February. Now it looks like it's declining a bit, and it's leveling out around $300 to $350, it looks like. So again, if you can find this card for about $300, $320, I would go ahead and grab it. And along that same theme, we have the Groudon art rare from Paradox Rift. This is another amazing art, very iconic art at this point. And we've seen what's possible with illustration rares from Scarlet and Violet era. For example, the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved. This Groudon hit again about $400 back in February. It's coming down now to about, looks like it bottomed out around $280, and it is back up on the rise, going back up over $300 again. And this card is a bit easier to grade than the Tyranitar. It does have a PSA 10 gem rate of under 40% and a little under 4,000 copies right now in a PSA 10. I would say this card has the potential to maybe be another $400 to $500 card by the end of the year. And finally, we have the Altaria EX from Paradox Rift. This is a special illustration rare card, so in theory, it should be a bit harder to pull than the Groudon illustration rare. This card went up to about 230, looks like, around March of this year. And it came down to about $150 to $160. Looks like it did bottom out. It's coming back up now to about $170 to $180. Another one of those early Scarlet and Violet era cards that are really hard to grade. Gem rate is about 35% on this with PSA, and there's only 1,500 PSA 10 copies out there. So a lot of these early Scarlet and Violet era hits, you would think there's a bunch out there, everyone's saying it's printed to the ground and whatnot. But the thing is, these cards are actually very hard to grade in a 10. So maybe there'll be that scarcity element for a lot of these cards. And if you look on the open market right now, there aren't really any listings under $200 anymore. So yeah, again, if you can find this card at a local deal or on a Facebook group for about $175, $180, I would go for it. It is a really cool artwork. We have a very well-known Pokemon, Altaria, flying over the sea, it looks like, with a bunch of Wingulls in the back. Looks like some great watercolor artwork here. So I'm definitely a fan of this card. It is scarce too in a PSA 10. I think it would be a good pickup. Even around this $200 price point, I do think there is upside potential here with this card. But yeah, that's all I got today, guys. Thank you so much, and see you next time.